Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Africa Regulatory Conference 2025, Advancing the Clinical Research Ecosystem in Africa, Inclusive, Innovative, and Impact-Driven Approaches. We are in our third of the four-part webinar series focused on innovation and clinical trial designs and digital technologies, and we're very happy to have everybody with us today. So for the first part of today's webinar, it will be moderated by Carrie Cullinan from Health Policy Watch, focusing the conversation around the clinical research ecosystem. And session 2, after a short break, will be moderated by Dr. Vasi Murthy from the World Health Organization and will be focused on case studies. So if we could move to the participant guide or the housekeeping slides, just to remind everybody that the conference is in English today. Interpretation is in French, and please look for the interpretation symbol at the bottom of your screen if you would like to go into the French language. We are having 2 audience Q&A sessions today. So as you're listening to the presentations, to the conversation, if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A. This would be very helpful because then we'll be able to address that question during the audience Q&A session at the end of both presentations today. We're also going to be sharing information and resources with you via Zoom, so please watch out for that. There is a resource button at the bottom, so you can click on that and you'll be directed to some hyperlinks, web links that may be of interest. And just to remind everybody that today's session is recorded. Once these are available, we will post them on the Africa Regulatory Conference website. And so you can take a look at the recordings then and there. We go to the next slide, please. So now I would like to hand it over to Carrie Cullinan, who's going to moderate session 1. Thank you, Kelly.
Thanks so much, Janice, and welcome everybody. We have the first session is 3 speakers. We have 20 minutes each, and there's time for questions at the end. So please pop your questions into the Q&A box. But we have 3 excellent speakers, which I think will give us a good grounding for session 2, which goes into case studies about innovative clinical trial designs. So our first speaker is Dr. Romino Mariano, who's the Chief of Staff of the Africa Clinical Research Network. We have heard from them before in webinar number 1 for those who were around then. Romino has led vaccine effectiveness studies across Africa. She's been involved in global disease prevention campaigns and international health initiatives. She is going to speak to us about strengthening the clinical research ecosystem across regulatory, digital, and capacity building domains. So over to you, Romino. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction, Carrie. It's a great pleasure to join this session. I just want to make sure that the slides are coming up from your end. Great, thank you. So first of all, I just want to start off by acknowledging the incredible colleagues on this panel. They will be introduced following my talk, but we have the AVAREF team whose regulatory leadership is essential to everything that we do at ACRN, and the CTC Africa initiative, which is creating that digital visibility and transparency that allows our systems to connect. And so ACRN, a bit more of a new kid on the block, really sees ourselves as forming part of that ecosystem, a platform that helps align regulation, digital infrastructure, and capacity building to make Africa's clinical research ecosystem more competitive. And so the goal is really not to just run trials, but to connect people, data systems in a way that transforms how research is done on the continent. Next slide, please. For those of you who don't know us, ACRN is an Africa-led clinical research network. We connect researchers to opportunities, enhance research capacity in existing facilities, and support the implementation of high-quality trials and research. But fundamentally, this is all founded on building trust in the research community and key stakeholders, while leveraging technology, which will be part of today's talk, for a robust digital infrastructure that really forms the backbone of what we're able to do. Next slide, please. So ACRN's mission and vision is really to drive innovation and quality in Africa's clinical research landscape. The idea here is to enable Africa-led globally competitive clinical research by building out the sustainable network of trial-ready sites. We don't imagine achieving our vision alone to increase Africa's share of global trials from that roughly 3% to 15% by 2035. I really hope that, through forums such as this, where collaborators come together to think about how we develop this ecosystem within Africa, that is something that we can all achieve together. And ACRN would be incredibly privileged to be part of that journey. The approach from our side is really focused on the trial quality across sites, the acceleration of study startup and recruitment, and building long-term capacity and sustainability. Next slide. I'm sure that everybody on this call already knows a lot of this, but I just wanted to speak to the fact that in established markets, trials are struggling. Over 70% of oncology studies in the US fail to meet enrollment targets on time. Costs are skyrocketing. And Africa, by contrast, offers young populations, rapidly expanding healthcare infrastructure, and increasing regulatory maturity. So for global sponsors, Africa really is essential to solving today's trial bottlenecks. We have the fastest projected growth across therapeutic areas, even beyond infectious disease. And we really feel that early movers in Africa will gain a strategic advantage for faster recruitment, embedded diversity and representative data, and partnerships that build long-term access and trust. And so really what we've spent a lot of time thinking about at ACRN is how do we learn from the current global clinical trial landscape and think about what we currently have in Africa, how we leverage the existing resources and connect those in order to really build differently. Next slide, please. And so here, thinking about these global challenges on the left with site concentration, insufficient diversity, fragmented requirements, digital fragmentation, and really thinking about the fragmentation and inefficiencies in clinical research. These disconnected systems, duplicated requirements, and communities are often left out of the process. And so really thinking about Africa and how we can potentially do this differently, ACRN has come together around a few core themes. The first is the distributed site network. So we're a non-exclusive site network, but really focused on accessing patients where they seek care. The embedded diversity I spoke to before, really thinking about that representation, relevance, and safety of our trials and the data that we're collecting. That integrated digital backbone for trial efficiency and the use of AI as we move into the age of AI now, capitalizing on those tools for use in streamlining clinical trials. That leads to streamlined startup. We can harmonize SOPs, gather that regulatory intelligence, and really reduce timelines. The previous session where ACRN did also participate was on community engagement, and we feel that trusted community partnerships are key to the sustainability and the ecosystem to really ensure that you have retention and adherence, but also buy-in from key stakeholders, providers, and governments. There's a big gap often in data on the African continent, and so epidemiology and genomics for better trial design and faster recruitment is something we're focused on. Unified requirements, thinking about how the network can become more efficient, and then of course sustainable workforce. So in this case, capacity building really speaking to training pipelines, a regional capacity building for reduced staff turnover, and really thinking about careers within the clinical research space and how we professionalize those in the context of Africa. Next slide. So the focus is really building to deliver on research priorities. We need a strategic platform that's aligned to sponsor both global health and industry sponsors pipelines, delivery needs, and a commitment to equity in trials. So this comes around these five themes that really come together that we feel would be critical in order for us to achieve the goals and the mission and the vision that we've set out. So that site expansion focus, as I mentioned, we're a non-exclusive network, but really thinking about intentionally and strategically growing a trial-ready network, inclusive of both ML3 countries and also high-burden non-ML3 countries, with structured onboarding and transparent criteria, due diligence, and tiered readiness. So the idea here in the site expansion focus is if we are going to be building and strengthening a clinical research ecosystem, we need to leverage and sustain the incredible infrastructure that exists with some very mature and experienced sites, but also think about how we bring into that ecosystem aspects of the healthcare system or investigators that haven't necessarily had the opportunity to do research before. In that way, we can strengthen our geographic reach and our therapeutic breadth and bring in that additional expertise that perhaps just hasn't had the opportunity due to previous funding being quite siloed and disease specific. Flexible contracting is something that we feel is essential to the ecosystem, thinking about how ACRN as an organization can serve as an SMO, a trial execution partner, or sponsor delegate, and can offer modular services depending on the sponsor structure and trial complexity. So that flexibility and agility within Africa and within this ecosystem, we think is something that will address some of the needs in how Africa can build this out differently. The community trust infrastructure, as we've mentioned previously, is really something that is absolutely critical to this. We see community engagement and community infrastructure as really a key system enabler, not just a communications add-on to the clinical trial landscape. Therapeutic alignment, as I mentioned, the focus is on global health, of course. Infectious disease would form a large part of that, but really thinking beyond that to maternal child health, non-communicable diseases, oncology, cardiometabolic, really thinking about the healthcare priorities on the continent and our growing population. And then finally, that digital enablement. So the integrated digital stack for trial execution, but then as mentioned, that the AI enhanced workflows for project oversight, site performance, and risk monitoring. And as part of that, really thinking about how we build the workforce that's going to sustain locally our ability to have that software development and digital integration on the continent. Next slide. To just touch on briefly ACRN's service offering, really what we've tried to establish here is a way to form a platform that can connect the different pieces. And so we think of clinical research not as just a science, but as a development strategy. Every trial improving the standard of care. It's been shown in a number of different pieces of work that just the basic level of healthcare in systems where a lot of clinical research and trials are done improves quite dramatically. And so it's quite an exciting opportunity to benefit not only the research community, academia, but also the healthcare systems at large. So ACRN functions currently as a site management organization. We've been working with a number of our initial partners on studies this year, getting them ready for site qualification visits, and then taking them through the studies. We offer modular trial execution services. This is something that we're building out from now to 2028. That includes laboratory services and logistics for specimen and lab kit transport, etc. We have our policy and regulatory advocacy platform where we really, appreciate the input of organizations like AVRIF as we try to think how ACRN as an on-the-ground implementer can start to build out that real-world data collection around these processes and support new initiatives and new proof of concepts on how we might be able to make this more efficient, both for regulatory and ethics committees as well as policymakers. Community engagement is something that we repeat ad nauseum because it's just something that's so critical to our work. And then finally, the real world evidence and research. And here's really where some of that digital enablement we think will be quite exciting as we start to look at cohorts of patients across the different countries that we're working in, collecting biomarkers and genomics such that we'd be able to inform smarter trial design, have stronger regulatory evidence and faster recruitment, and really just put together a more robust offering when it comes to sponsors in clinical trials. Next slide. So fundamentally,
so sorry, just before you carry on,
yes.
There's a request that you can speak, if you could speak a little slower because there's French interpretation and the interpreters are struggling a little. So if you don't mind just going a little bit slower. Thank you so much.
No problem. Sorry about that. Thank you. Thank you for that. I will do so. So workforce development is something that is critical to this ecosystem build out. So you have I will move on later to discuss more about the site network. However, right now, what we are thinking about as one of the core focuses at ACRN and in partnership with a number of different organizations is how we develop a modular, multi-tiered workforce development platform. This is leveraging existing efforts, existing packages and tools that are used for educational and training purposes. So not trying to reinvent the wheel in any way in terms of the training, but bringing it together so that we really get to a point where we start to think about foundational research skills, but then move all the way up to advanced leadership training within this space. We're trying to create career paths, not just temporary training, and so that research within the African context becomes a viable profession and not just a short-term project. And so we've broken this down into a number of different components that we think are critical to the workforce development aspect. Of course, internal training curriculum and materials, ensuring that foundational research skills are offered across ACRN and the ACRN network, but then also thinking about role-specific training for staff and career progression within that. What is the trajectory? What types of accreditations and other components to that career development can we bring in to our learning management system to ensure that staff see the potential and the career growth within that space as we start to think about building out the ecosystem within Africa. We do site-based training at affiliate and specialized centers, so hands-on training for local teams. Some of this is study-specific, as you'll see the fourth point on the left-hand side. So we also customize protocols and SOPs, create videos and written elements of training. And this is in multiple different languages and can be, and we do arrange the translation of that as well. We then have also got embedded fellowships, so on-the-job training for early career professionals, and then finally thinking about that site-based capacity uplift and executive upskilling. So thinking about the ecosystem from a capacity building and workforce development. ACRN in itself is not a funder. We are a service provider and a network, and really, I hope, a platform that can help support and coordinate some of the initiatives that are ongoing. But we really want to ensure that in terms of the capacity building, it's sustainable. It's something that leads to leadership opportunities within this space in Africa, and that we deal with everything from that technical clinical trial work, mandatory training, all the way through to finance, contracting, digital systems, and a number of other soft skills, grant management, etc., that would be essential for sustainability of a clinical trial ecosystem. And then finally, bringing in the digital theme even into the workforce development is thinking about how we deploy this online for self-paced modules, how we enable access to both network partners as well as people in more rural areas, etc., in order to access this training. And so we've done a lot of work thinking about how we bring all of these components together, collaborate with partners on the ground across disciplines, and really bring together, core competencies, but also all of that additional skills development such that you are truly training the workforce of the future. And one of the components here that we've been focused on quite intently is thinking about the digital infrastructure, software development, and the workforce that's going to be needed to support things like AI on the continent. And I think that deserves a special focus in the context of clinical trials in Africa, because we're trying to future-proof what the countries and sites are going to be able to do. And I think having the workforce on the continent being able to offer opportunities to young professionals in this space and the opportunity to join an organization where they can use that skill set is something that we're really excited about. Next slide, please. So what we've really thought about is how to have a strategic country footprint for scalable trial execution. So the regulatory component is critical, market potential and trial infrastructure. Those all come together. a number of the trials that have taken place over the last couple of years in Africa have really kind of focused predominantly in South Africa, in Kenya, in Ethiopia. And so we're starting to think about how do you really broaden that, get that geographic reach that really represents the different genetics and origins of the different components of the African continent, and ensure that all of those countries where there is expertise and that desire to do clinical research can be accessed. And so here we've thought about feasibility and infrastructure, about the regulatory accessibility, of course, the market potential, so thinking about the disease burden areas and expertise, sponsor momentum, so whether there's existing industry trial activity there or partner interest, or future interest in industry partners wanting to do trials in those countries, and then also very critically government alignment. So engaging with the ministries of health and other government entities, having MOUs, really getting an understanding of what the needs are specific to that country in terms of disease burden and what their policy environment is something that's really critical to creating that sustainable support infrastructure for clinical research. Next slide, please. So our current footprint as ACRN at least is we are working across 7 countries with 19 sites for 2025 on a trial pipeline that includes infectious disease, maternal child health, NCDs. We are running phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 studies this year. And we're really starting to think about how we move from this somewhat more opportunistic footprint that we've ended up with in 2025 based on the trial pipeline that we had, and how we start to bring in specific expertise with partners that have skill sets such as PK/PD or pharmacogenomics, really building out all the different components that you would need for a sustainable ecosystem. And so this is what we've created over the last year that we've existed with ACRN. And if we move to the next slide, then we will see our more dedicated strategic network expansion has been through an expression of interest process that launched at the end of August. And here we've really thought about how we enable a shift from opportunistic partnerships to strategic network expansion. And we've had more than 317 submissions across the continent, across therapeutic areas. And it shows really, the appetite and readiness across Africa to be part of a shared high-performing clinical research ecosystem. And I think that it's been incredibly exciting. What we're working on right now is contacting all the sites that have reached out to us and planning in-person visits. So as part of this process, we have a site assessment team that will do in-person visits at all the sites and centers that want to be involved in ACRN, so that we have a true sense of where they fit in within the ecosystem, what pipelines we have coming over the short sort of to medium term to support these sites and centers, and the role that they might play as we think about the strategic initiative being truly Pan-African. Next slide. So we've spoken about the workforce development and really setting up that network. I'm not going to go into much detail here, as if you did attend the last webinar that's part of this IFPMA series, you would have heard the detail around the community trust and retention. But this is something that for us is really critical as a foundational element for the ecosystem, because it really touches on all the important stakeholders and ensures that you have evidence-based recruitment, that you're really speaking to the needs of the community. And from a policy perspective and sustainability perspective, that's something that's incredibly critical to being able to develop a better understanding and buy-in to clinical research and clinical trials. Next slide. To touch briefly on, because Avaref will be coming on shortly, the regulatory and policy intelligence, we're really thinking about how ACRN, while it cannot directly support regulators and ethics boards, because that would be a conflict of interest, what we can offer to the system in terms of end-to-end trial submissions, regulatory readiness reviews, mapping out the different countries, developing a regulatory intelligence database, collaborating with existing efforts on the continent, but then really, as we run our studies, collecting that real world data, moving through the study process that can speak to timelines, changing policies, and really enable us to have on-site training and strategic engagement with the regulators and policy developers that speaks to our real world on the ground live data collection. Next slide. The final piece to really bring in here is thinking about the digital technology that currently in the global setting and in Africa, technology is not an add-on. It really has to be something that operates as the backbone of our model. It provides us with opportunities to really think about our ability to do novel trial design, to reach populations that we weren't able to reach before, and to really think about how we start to collect data across the continent in a structured way that can inform trial design and startup specific to the populations that it's serving. Next slide. So the development of a really robust digital operating system with a digital stack that is able to do the core trial operations, but then bring in the safety elements, the AI-enabled feasibility, pharmacovigilance, the digital dashboards and analytics is something that we think is critical. We really want to ensure that this digital-first approach underpins everything from startup to closeout, so that Africa's research ecosystem is not just keeping pace, but leading transformation. We've seen on the African continent, in banking and in other fields, the novelty and the innovation within the tech space. And so I think we're dealing with really a fragmented system, very a scattered system in terms of, some sites are paper-based, some are dealing with minimal digital infrastructure, some have already deployed full electronic healthcare record systems. And so we're at that point where there is a lot of need and excitement on the continent. And if we can really bring it together in a way that speaks to the needs of the healthcare systems in each country, but then can also say something about how we move forward strategically within this space, I think it's a really exciting time to be involved in clinical research in Africa. Next slide. So just to say very briefly on that data collection element, what we've been pulling together at the moment is thinking about how we take the source data from the different sites and centers that we work with, whether it be semi-structured PDFs, handwritten notes, basic EMRs, really bring that all together and enable ourselves to extract specific data, run analytics on that, and then start to think about how we can then have really good data sets around the patient populations that we're serving through our sites and centers, and how we start to use that to then bring people in, do the genomics and other testings on them, and then really be able to have these well-characterized cohorts that give us a much better sense about the disease process within these settings, safety, and trial design. Next slide.
You're going to have to wrap up.
Absolutely. This is the second last slide. So this is really how we're triangulating our ACRN network with industry, global health and governments, and the digital technology so that we can collect this real world data, which have the longitudinal cohorts, integrated systems, and then actionable insights in this. Next slide. And the final slide was just to speak to the ecosystem approach. Is that really what we're thinking about at ACRN? Is if we are trying to create a true ecosystem, what we're really encouraging those around us to do, whether it be our engagement with ministries of health or other organizations, is to think about life sciences ecosystem in Africa, how we make Africa competitive globally, how we make it more attractive for investment and for clinical trials. And so through that, thinking about the life sciences value chain and the critical enablers that through clinical research and clinical trials we can contribute to that would support this broader ecosystem that would lead to a sustainable research economy. So I will end there. Thank you so much. Sorry for going a couple of minutes over time. Really appreciate the ability to participate. And I will now hand back to you, Kerry. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Romina. And we now have 140 participants. So it's amazing to see how many people have joined. And please don't forget, we're going to take questions at the end of the speakers. So just pop them into the Q&A. Our next speaker is Dr. Kwazi Nyako. He's the coordinator of the African Vaccine Regulatory Forum, AVRF, which is a network of national regulatory authorities and ethics committees set up by the WHO back in 2006 to build capacity and harmonize product development in Africa. He's going to give us an update about innovation in African trials and what's happening on the continent. So straight over to you, Dr. Kwazi. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you, colleagues. And it's a privilege to be here to talk about what's happening and to be part of this exciting movement. Hearing Romina speak, basically, it would be like we had planned the stuff we're talking about, but because there is going to be quite a bit of overlap, but it's also because I think we are all undertaking this ecosystem approach in the work that we need to do, and that's probably the best way to get this forward. So my topic is really innovation in clinical trials and what's going on continentally from our point of view. Next slide. So next slide, please. So I will be basically talking about that, as I have started with just a bit of the context to give an idea of the state of the ecosystem from an NRA ethics committee point of view, a little bit about innovation and where we see innovation, and so on and so forth. Next slide. Okay, so it's been mentioned about, Africa being a part of contributing in less than 3% of the clinical trials globally on the continent. And the desire that we have, and my colleague had actually mentioned their desire to move from 3 to 15. Actually, I'm shy to say that we were saying 2 to 10%, but either way, we're still moving forward. But importantly, why do we need this? We need this because the burden of disease that we have in our continent is quite high. And without effective medicines and tools, we won't be able to really deal with this stuff. When we talk about the products that we produce, it's also quite low in terms of actual pharmaceutical production. And with the population and the needs, if all we're doing is importing, it really beats the desires for sovereignty and so on and so forth that we're talking about. And she did mention our demographic advantage, the advantages of heterogeneity and so on and so forth. And essentially also the great economic benefits for actually that can result out of this going forward. Next slide. And so these are some of the examples of why Africa is an amazing site or continent for trials. And Romina did speak a lot about this. But importantly, we can all see the benefits that if we're able to harness this with our free trade zone in terms of what's happening, emergence of the African Medicines Agency, and so on and so forth, our young population, our incredibly diverse genetics, this definitely will bode well, not only for Africa, but for the entire world, because we do believe that access to medicines and some of these interventions that we believe will come from the continent would be of benefit to everyone. Next slide. And so these are just some of the benefits of having more clinical trials, which Romana actually did speak about. Access to novel therapies, access to new research, helping with rare conditions, diseases where actually we do have some endemic situations where it would be easy to recruit, opportunities for bringing on new indications, even for existing drugs, and so on and so forth, decreased cost for our populations, and definitely a good ecosystem for clinical research, because clinical trials in where we're coming from is really an indicator for innovation. And so we expect that with these benefits, there will be offshoots in other areas, be it biotechnology and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. So you're all aware that the African Medicines Agency is being operationalized now. And in terms of the work that AVRF is doing, at least it's important that we do provide the context. AVREF actually is the technical coordinating committee for clinical trials under the African Medicines Agency. So what we continue to do is supporting the operationalization of the African Medicines Agency. And so it's basically work as usual as we continue to support the NRAs and the ethics committees for clinical trials, but also we're keeping an eye on the ecosystem. Eventually, what we're going to end up doing with the Africa Medicines Agency is just going to be decided between the two organizations, since we're looking at WHO and the African Union organization. And so the details are going to be worked out between the leadership, but for what it's worth, we continue to work together and essentially working hand in hand. Next slide. So this just to give a bit of context about the regulatory situation for the continent. In the last 2 decades, there has been significant increases in regulations in the regulatory environment, but essentially, while there has been this, we continue to have a limited clinical trial numbers and volume, as we talked about. This limitation actually has some unintended consequences in a sense that even when it comes to our reviewers having lots of experience and exposure, it's actually quite difficult if you're not getting a lot of trials to actually go through. In terms of processes, in terms of harmonization, all this, we do believe that as you have more trials, we will be able to support the ecosystem. In terms of human resources, the resources are still low in terms of, as you know, clinical trials tend to be particularly the early phases are the initial stages of innovation. So that does require quite a bit of expertise. And so we need to look at that. Not all regulatory agencies have all the expertise, and this doesn't happen even everywhere. So reliance and working together is important. Ensuring that our processes are aligned in terms of processes are definitely important, and ensuring that we have the digital tools that would be innovative to really help in the realization of this is critical to what we do. And these are some of the state. Next slide. Yes. So, we all hear about the challenges and so on and so forth. This is really challenges from the perspective of folks that work within NRAs. In the last, we got this information, last week or so, or last month, in terms of what the challenges are. And, as much as we've seen quite a number of improvements, we still do see that, these are talking about things like incomplete applications, and ACRN talked about having a service that's going to help with that in terms of the timelines, limited resources, financial, non-sustainability, and so on. These are all things that we talked about. But collectively, the key irritants we see has to do with timelines and procedures. I hate to use this word, but fragmented systems, but it's not as fragmented as we do think about harmonization. We do have guidelines and so on and so forth. But I think innovation really is how we begin to solve these problems. So we wanted to put this in context, not to glorify the problems, but really to indicate that there are solutions coming forward. Next slide. So I'm to talk about innovation and what is innovation. And I just started looking at it to say, okay, what's innovation? What do people consider to be innovative? Well, words of like these are kind of what you see: new creations, improving on existing, creativity, application, adding value, usefulness, impact. All that stuff can be described as innovative. So really what's happening when it comes to innovation in this sector? Next slide. Okay, so we could see that the ecosystem is evolving, the ecosystem is increasing. There is more adaptive trials. The traditional trials tend to be expensive, cost is prohibitive. We have new emerging vaccines, as an example, that's coming up, where if you're using traditional methods, possibly if you're not even using surrogate markers, it's going to be difficult. So we are beginning to see new designs, innovative designs, We are all aware of our unrealized potential that we're trying to address. You have issues of, vaccine hesitancy, impacts of technologies, and so on and so forth. So all these changes require that we respond to this. And I believe some of the approaches that are going to be presented today will lead to or indicate how innovative we've been, not to mention the desire for having local manufacturing, not just of vaccines, but other innovative medicines. Next slide. Okay, so I want to just provide a bit of a reliance network that AVAREF we have been working on in the last year or so, just to give us an example of our innovative process, which has been designed to address some of the irritants that we talked about. Definitely, there is a need to provide consistency and predictability to product developers, even for the NRAs and so on and so forth. So because of this, we have a reliance network that we believe addresses the issue of predictability and consistency in a sense that the member states involved are going to clearly outline what their needs are. We're going to be abiding by these timelines and processes, and that can only increase what we do. Is designed to reinforce the capacity of the NRAs and the ethics committees specifically to ensure that they would be able to effectively review the complex applications that are coming through. In the process of doing that, we are addressing preparedness for pandemics as well. We have reviewer development programs integrated, exposure to a wide variety of disease areas, and provision of expertise that actually support this going forward. Next slide. So these countries are the 16 member countries that actually are working in this network. And the countries have provided resources, reviewers in particular, that are therefore working together. And you could see that these countries which have some of the high levels of clinical trials, we have good representation on the continent. The maturity level is quite high. They are not all ML3s. We have, a wide range. And these countries are pulling their resources together, working on really building a true reliance network that doesn't just rely on the member states, but actually relying on the individual expertise within these countries. And they are working towards a situation where if there is one approval in each of the countries by this network, it will be accepted. And this would be sort of an innovative change in the system. Next slide. And so what is this about? Each of the countries provided us with 3 reviewers. We've also received nominations for reviewers from the NRA side. We have reviewers from the ethics side, and now we are working on providing them with the necessary training. I'll talk a little bit more about this. In addition to that, we are leveraging on this training and this network to ensure that we have consistency within the regulatory frameworks in these countries, since they are going to be working together to accept each other's decisions, ensuring that the ethics is aligned. And we're going to get into bringing on other parts of the ecosystem, which is the researchers and working with the clinical trial sites, the manufacturers, and so on and so forth. Now, is AVAREF going to be able to do all this? Definitely no. And this is the reason why we work with partners like ACRN and others that are here to ensure that we actually develop this ecosystem. Yes, while our focus is on NRAs and ethics committees for clinical trials, we do have to recognize that this requires that we work with the others. The last 2 points, I'm not going to mention them here. I will discuss them in subsequent slides. Next slide. Okay, so within this, so because we work in a network and because of the importance of an ecosystem approach, what we are doing in the training is really using real life examples in the training that we do by establishing a matrix-based system where within the 48 reviewers that we have, We are helping each of them based on their level of expertise, be it clinical, be it non-clinical, the quality aspects for product development, new introduction. So we're not giving the same training to all the 48. We have subgroups there. We have groups that are working on a regulatory harmonization, on guidelines. We have groups that are working on the ethics, and we also actually have a digital working group that's looking at the IT system that we need to be able to get this done. Next slide. For this to happen, we do require a digital platform, and there is the working group that is working on it, but this platform is actually being developed, and we're working with the Accumulus system there. This is courtesy of Gates Foundation and CEPI. We are actually working on this to ensure that reviewers from multiple sites, given the 16 countries, can actually work on a similar platform, review dossiers. The site can help us in managing the information for reviewers to be able to chat, for decisions to be made, for best practices to be made, for timelines to be monitored. And this platform is currently being developed. And we do expect that by having such a process, and I think Adrian will talk more about digital tools, we'll be able to improve the efficiency, the timeliness, and the impact, and actually be able to strengthen collaborations. And not only do we work so that we believe that in the process of doing that, we're going to have reviewers that actually know each other, reviewers that have trained together, work together, and have a true reliance network going forward. Next slide. Yeah, okay. So we have this pilot that actually in the process of day-to-day working, by tweaking things, we are going to ensure that we're going to have more harmonized processes and streamlining. Why? Because these countries are now working together. They are going to agree on processes that are harmonized, that's going to be accepted, since they are going to be accepted decisions. We are going to ensure that we leverage on this, for example, to ensure that the clinical trial sites and clinical trial units there are also coordinated and harmonized. And we are going to be working with, WHO has recently developed a clinical trial unit maturity framework that we are going to use, and working with others such as ACRN, we will be able to really have clinical trial sites or units that are operating at international levels. That is really going to help us in getting the data. We are also working to ensure that we're building the capacity for specialized reviewers. We do have reviewers that would be based on, or that would have expertise in the various disease dimensions, in the various specialties. For example, we have an ongoing training for biostatistics for reviewers, and so on and so forth. And finally, to ensure that emergency preparedness is not forgotten. Well, emergency preparedness is really based on how well you do your day-to-day work. If you can do your day-to-day work effectively in an emergency, you will be prepared. But then we're going to add other stuff to it to ensure that we deal with this. So this is the part of the example of what we are currently working on. Next slide. Yes. So now with regard to what we are doing in AVRF, yes, while we're building capacity, it's really standing on partnerships and alliances for results. And we are willing to work with anyone who helps in the achievement of that. We're working with others such as the EMA, the US FDA, and others, Health Canada, to ensure that we are providing the necessary expertise. In addition to that, within the African regulators as well, we have experts that are helping us in doing this, and recognition that not only are we focusing on the NRAs and ethics committees, but we have to keep an eye on what's going on in the entire ecosystem, looking at the innovation life cycle. So this is the approach that we are taking. Next slide. And so in addition to this, this leads us into, AVRF reboot going forward. With everything that's happening, AVRF, we do have a good network for NRAs and ethics committees, but we're now going to leverage this to ensure that the networks are extended for research and development, for clinical trial sites, for manufacturers, and also for effectiveness studies. So AVRF is going to be therefore working in ensuring that these communities are created using the model that we did for AVRF to ensure that regulatory was on its way. And now you have the African Medicines Agency. We will look at other aspects of the ecosystem to ensure that we are building a strengthened ecosystem to ensure that for the continent and the people we serve, they are going to get access to the innovative medicines that are affordable and appropriate for addressing the disease burden that we have. Next slide. And so with this, we have the capacity building site for ethics committees that we are working on. Not going to go into so much details there. Next slide. Similar, and these slides will be shared so you can have that. But essentially, for with regard to ethics committees, we are going to be developing guidelines for the ethics committees to ensure that the review processes for ethics is consistent and that we provide in the necessary capacity, just as we've done for NRAs. With regard to the clinical trial units, there is some ongoing work here, but this starts with the maturity framework that WHO has developed to enable the sites to actually do their own self-improvements, but working with the regulatory agencies in there, we will ensure that we are working with sites trying to promote this, because if the sites are not good, the studies are not going to come anyway. And so this is particularly an area that we are going to be working very well with the ACRN network. Next slide. Next, the rest of the slides is really on these sites with regard to the research and development. There are various communities that we will try to support. So, for example, given that we sit in the vaccine preventable diseases unit in the WHO, we will be supporting the network for R&D for vaccines, for new vaccines that are being developed with regard to their clinical trials and so on and so forth. These are some of the things that we need to do, because to be able to advance research and to be able to ensure that we see the clinical trials, we need to keep an eye and support some of the R&D. Next slide.
Dr. Nyako, you're going to have to wrap up, I'm afraid.
I am wrapping up. So next slide. Yeah. So in conclusion, we continue to work with member states to ensure that we'll be able to advance this clinical trial ecosystem and contributing to the solutions that are pragmatic, such as we've talked about, that are based on real-life solutions for real-life problems, that are adaptable, sustainable, and we continue to support member states with workforce development and supporting the increase in the clinical trials, at least by 10% by 2035, not 2025. Sorry. Thanks again. So I'm done. Next slide.
Thank you so much. I think that both of the presentations give us an understanding of the range of work that is needed, but that is being undertaken. So thanks to both the previous speakers. I think we'll have an opportunity in question time to ask for more details. But our final speaker for this session is Adrian Kruger, who's the co-founder and CEO of a South African company called Nuvotech. This company is transforming the global clinical research landscape by delivering FDA and EMA validated software solutions, so that's US and European validated software solutions, to modernize clinical trials. Adrian is the CEO and founder of this company, and he is going to tell us about the Clinical Trial Community Africa platform. So over to you, Adrian.
Awesome. Thank you, Kerry. And thanks for having me. Excited to share this platform with everyone that's attending the session today. It was good to hear Romina and Kwasi speak, as a lot of our work overlap. We're based here in South Africa, and the platform that I'll tell you about today is called the Clinical Trials Community Platform. It was sort of a concept that was shared at the World Economic Forum and in 2018, and we're all trying to solve the same type of problem that we have, where we sitting with a significant amount of disease burden on the continent, and also with a large population of the world. I think by 2035, a quarter of the people globally will be based in Africa. But yet we're struggling to get investment into the continent when it comes to clinical trials. And one of the ways that we can help as a digital or a technology company is to showcase the research capability that we have on the continent through an interactive platform. And that is what we did with the clinical trials community platform. We work with a number of different partners on the continent. We get data from a number of different data sources, and then ultimately we make it quite intuitive and easy for people to find out exactly where the research centers are based, and also what trials they have been conducting. We use a number of different ways to clean the data that we have, but maybe you can go to the next slide and I can go maybe just into a bit of detail around how we work with the data. So our main source of data that we have on the platform are the registries. So we have a direct link into clinicaltrials.gov. We work closely with the two African registries, being the Pan-African Clinical Trials Registry and also the South African one. And then we are slowly but surely partnering up with more of the registries locally on the continent, and then also in the process to partner with ICTRP, who are obviously the platform of registries hosted under WHO. So out of these registries, a lot of the trials are listed multiple times. And then within each of these registries, the data is not always that clean. So the research centers, the way the names are spelled or how they are profiled by different people loading the data, it always differs. When you think at Kemry or the University of the Cape Town, it's they use abbreviations or they use different ways of how they list these research centers. So we developed a deep learning model using natural language processing to automatically clean the data that we get out of these registries. And where we initially, I think we got a database of around 28,000 research centers on the continent. And we've narrowed it down to roughly 3,500 research centers that we know of today that have conducted trials over the past 14 years. Another thing that we did is we have a database of all the clinical trials that we know have taken place on the continent. So there we have a database after removing all the duplicates of about 30,000 trials that we know of. And within the registry there and where these trials are listed, we have fairly clean data, but always not the best. But we have an idea of which therapeutic they were focusing on, and also these trials at which research center were they running. So we started cross-referencing these two different data sets, so we know which trials have been conducted at which research centers, and then we ran all of that through a GPS model, and then we actually plotted all the research centers along with their associated trials all across the continent in an interactive map. And that was sort of the base of where this initiative started. And from there it grew, and we started plotting all kinds of additional stakeholders on this interactive map. And we tried to make it a matchmaking platform for funders or CROs or groups like ACRN to find research centers that they potentially didn't know existed. But an ongoing problem and a challenge that we deal with is how do we encourage research centers to keep their data up to date? And that is something where we have a couple of different plans on, and I can definitely share that during the Q&A session. So in the next slide, we're going to go into a bit of an interactive demo. You can maybe just click the next slide button one more time and just give it like a second. Oh, there, you can click there, yeah, the video will start playing. So this is an interactive demonstration just to show you what the platform looks like. So it's a free platform. It's available to the public, ctc.africa. And in there's a number of different ways of how you can use the platform. The main sort of the epicenter of the platform is this interactive map, where it has a number of different things that we are busy plotting there. And I do apologize to the translators. I also tend to speak a little bit fast, and this video is going to play as fast as it plays. So I will try and use my words carefully. Within the platform, we have a number of different entities that are profiled, and then we link different elements together. So we can see within a research center which type of trials they've done, but we can also see which CROs they are working with, and we can see which technology companies they are working with, and so forth. We have that ability. There you can see at the top, you can toggle any of those little icons there, and it will also show you some of the other stakeholders that we know of on the continent, whether it be a CRO or a laboratory or a translation company or maybe a logistics provider. We are in the process of linking all of these different entities together. So as part of your feasibility, if you're a sponsor organization, and you want to see which research centers are maybe already working with which CROs and which laboratories, those are things that we can then highlight to you in this map. We get a very interesting data from a disease burden perspective from the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation, which is data I showed there briefly, and then also have a lot of funding data that we get from GFinder, which is from Impact Global Health out of Australia. So you can toggle those switches at the bottom of the map. You can switch them on if you're on the platform, and you can easily see what the disease burden looks like or specific diseases, and you can also see what the funding is that is being allocated to these disease areas. So the majority of our data we get out of these public registries, and we pull data automatically into the platform. But of course, we also allow people to create a research center or load their research center or load their CRO or their laboratory. And this is sort of an interactive step-by-step process just to show you how we allow people to load a specific entity on the platform. Depending on the type of entity that you want to load, we will have subsequent questions that obviously is linked to that specific type of entity that you are loading. Contact details is always very important because then people know how to reach you. Here we allow you to identify where your head office is. So that is the little icon or the blip that we will use on the map to indicate where you are based. And then from there, because it's a CRO, you can now per country indicate what type of services you offer. And that will all feed into the interactive map and the filters that our customers use when they engage with the platform. So here you can see in this example, we had a couple of different countries and we selected different types of services. So once you've created your entity, here's a whole interactive section, but we kept it really short in this demo. But here you can now link all kinds of technology providers or laboratories or research centers that you already work with, so that when people engage with you, they can actually see exactly who you already work with. One thing that is important to us is to give the power to the research centers themselves so that they can actually update their own profiles, or anyone who owns any of these stakeholders that form part of a clinical trial. So any of the entities that we have there, if you are the administrator or the owner of this specific entity, you can come to the platform, you can engage with us, and we will give you ownership of that specific profile, and that will then allow you to update the data yourself. One exciting thing, a resource that we built through funding that we received from the EDCTP, is a clinical trial preparedness self-assessment. So this is a free tool that any research center can use. It is linked to a very thorough compendium document that anyone can go through a little self-assessment, and you can see exactly what you need to know when it comes to clinical trials. And then based on your answers you give there, we will highlight the gaps, and then you will be able to see exactly where you need to focus. It's nice training material based on the areas that you still need help with. And this tool will then direct you there. I know we're trying to catch up some time. So in this specific section here, it just shows you how we allow people also from the public to suggest updates to any type of data that they see on the platform. So maybe you go to a profile and you can see the email address or the URL of the specific entity changed. So you can go in there and you can suggest an update, and then that suggested update will then go to the owner of the platform, and they can then choose to accept those suggested updates or not. The last thing, which is something here that we just quickly went through, is we allow our user community to request any new features or even request suggested updates, like changes to existing features on the platform. We have received a number of quite interesting things. One of them we're actually going to showcase on the next screen. But this is a free platform. We invite anyone and everyone to use the platform, to register your profile, find your research center or find the ethics committee or regulatory agency that you work with, and engage with us if you want to take ownership of that profile and to keep it up to date. Yes, you can go to the next slide. You can click one more time. You can click one, okay, just this one. Yeah, so on this one, just wait there, just wait there. So on this one is specific, you can open the next one, don't worry. Just specifically around patient centricity, this has been a big topic that many people have asked us about. And because the platform is really focused at the moment on the matchmaking between funders, sponsor organization, large CROs, and for them to connect with research centers that they haven't worked with before or that they maybe want to engage with. But something that we haven't focused on yet is really specifically around patient centricity and how do we bring a patient into the mix. So one of the concepts that we are busy creating, this is only a concept, and we are in the process of creating a concept note and to unlock funding for this specific feature, but it will bring the patient into the platform. So we will still get data out of the registries, and then we are partnering with an Australian company called Trial Screen, or we intend to partner with them. So they have developed a mechanism where they can actually go into the registry and into the clinical trial and understand what the eligibility criteria looks like. They use natural language processing to turn it into a very plain English or understandable language self-assessment questionnaire, or a questionnaire that a patient self-qualification or a pre-screening questionnaire, like you can see there on the right-hand side. And that allows then the patient to quickly go through a yes, no, not applicable, or unsure answer. And based on that, they can quickly see whether they potentially qualify for a trial. This is all automated, all using agentic AI. So as new trials get loaded on the different registries, we will know exactly where they are being conducted, and those specific things can then become available to patients close to that area. But we thought, well, let's take it one step further. So you can click on just one slide forward, or we can just move it one forward. Just wait one more, and click it one more time, and just wait there for a while. So we thought, why don't we take it one step further and actually empower primary healthcare facilities on the continent who often see patients, and quite often patients aren't aware of clinical trials happening quite close to them that could provide them with life-saving assistance and studies that they can be part of. So we said, okay, why don't we create an interface where they can actually go through a quick assessment to understand what their vital signs look like. We capture some basic data, and then based on that, we can easily see what are the trials closest to them. So there's the interactive demo I just started, and there you can see this will be a healthcare worker or a patient that fills in this data. We capture basic details from them, from their like medical history, what chronic medicine or they may be using. We capture some contact details from them. And then from there, we understand what is their main primary condition that they have. Then Shen.ai, and there's a number of these different open source technologies that we could use. It actually does a self-assessment, and based on skin pigmentation changes, it can measure very high level vital signs and an assessment. From there, we'll already would have been able to complete a partial pre-screening. We will ask the healthcare worker or the patient dynamically to answer a couple of more questions, and then our AI model and our analysis will run. And it will actually tell you, based on the data that you filled in and where you are located at the moment, there might be a trial that you qualify for. And we have identified one trial in this example with 3 different locations that is close to the patient. From there, the healthcare worker can explain the trial to the patient, or the patient can click on that button and read about the trial themselves. All of this is once again automated. We pull the data out of the registry. And then from there, if they are keen to make a booking to go and visit this clinical research center, they can choose a date, choose a time slot, and then this will integrate and schedule a booking for them at the clinical trial center for an official screening visit. So this is what the clinical trial community is all about. We really want to create a matchmaking platform where we link pharma companies, CROs, sponsors, clinical researchers, and also in this case, in 2026, going forward, also the patient community. Thank you, Kerry. That is all from my side. I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks for letting us catch up with some questions. I was fascinated by that whole interactive thing, and I have some questions for you, but I'm going to go to the audience questions first. Some have been answered by some of the speakers, but some of them are so interesting that I'm going to ask for the answers to be repeated. So Grace asks, she asks of Romina, does this digital system reduce the timeline for trials? Does it speed up data collection and analysis? And also, does it rely on the internet? And what are the funding and sustainability considerations for implementation in low and middle income countries? Would we have to buy the software and devices? So Romina, you did give an answer, but I thought that a lot of people would like to hear your answer live. So please, if you don't mind repeating.
No, absolutely. I mean, obviously the answer in the chat is quite brief, but I think so. What ACRN has really fundamentally tried to do is that in each of our processes, we've set up specific outcomes that we're measuring, and we have a dedicated monitoring and evaluation unit that is, as we move through the trials, collecting all the different data points outside of the clinical data, but really the performance metrics. And so we started to see that by streamlining, I mean, I think that kind of was logical in what we were hoping it would show. And I think some of the things that we've just seen, as demonstrated by Adrian, is that the more technology is started to be crafted in a way that's really fit for purpose, you definitely start to streamline processes, and you find time saving, and also you get real-time alerts and real-time data collection. And so all of those elements, particularly when you think of safety and pharmacovigilance, become really critical. So I don't have formal numbers to share with you because we're still in the process of collecting that data over our first few trials, but we're definitely seeing some early indicators about how a digital backbone can really support trial efficiency, particularly when you start testing some AI tools. In terms of the internet question, that's obviously always a very big question. Right now, the current studies that we're running are all predominantly in urban areas. And so most of the sites and centers that we work with have internet as well as backup power supply. However, we are doing some dedicated work with some teams looking at how we build out that offline data collection for low connectivity settings. So definitely wanting to move as we evolve as ACRN into being able to do more decentralized trials, access more rural areas, and think about how we ensure that our digital systems are fit for purpose for that type of data collection as well. And then finally, so ACRN is not a funder, as I mentioned, but we also don't expect any funding to be provided by the sites. As part of our expression of interest, you fill in a form, we do a site assessment, we come and visit the site, and we really think about what you have, what is needed, what the critical components might be, how we leverage your existing infrastructure, and then work on that system integration with you as part of our network. So if if a study comes along and it requires something extra of that site, we would look to include that potentially, in the study budget, but we wouldn't expect the sites to be paying for any software or digital tools, at least in the near to short term. And so I've put my contact details also there. If anybody wants to reach out to me directly, we also have a website. Please do, because we're always happy to have collaborative conversations around these topics.
This one has also been answered in writing, but I would also like Kwasi to answer it because I think it's really interesting. CEPI, which is the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation, has once if there's a disease X, the next pandemic, they think that we should be able to respond within 100 days to develop a vaccine, which is crazy short time. So Faber asks, how do you see the 100 days CEPI mission regarding ethics and regulatory challenges? So Kwasi, you did answer it, but I think it would be worth you exploring that a little bit more in a live answer. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. So the issue of the 100 days is an interesting concept, and it's a good concept to work with. But for 100 days to be realizable, a lot of the work has to be done between now and when the 100 days you start doing the counting. There is no magic bullet here. We basically have to do the work ahead of time so that when the 100 days come, you have a lot of work done. So, for example, one of my premises is that if you have a national regulatory agency and you have folks there that actually know their work, that are capacitated to do their work, that have the right tools, then yes, during an emergency, they will be able to spring into action and actually do what they do in a very fast and quick way. A lot of the times we wait for the crisis and then you start to provide capacity for NRAs. The capacity has to be built now. This is where we need to go through. This is where we need the various groups that we can anticipate. We need to anticipate, we need to simulate. And so for the work that we are doing, as an example, I did mention our clinical trial reliance network. We do have a little group there for pandemic preparedness. We get them exposed to things of the pandemic nature, be it Ebola, be it Mpox. We work on simulations. We provide them with current information. We provide information on progress of research, what's going on, so that they know what the issues are. When we get invitations, these folks. So we are actually in a process in this pre-pandemic area preparing for it. We're looking at various complex designs, various adaptive designs, various statistics models that are going to be relevant. And we believe that in the process of doing that, we will be able, we best position ourselves. In addition to that, we do actually have a document on strategy, on how to implement what to do during an emergency. Well, most places should have standard operating procedures. They should have guidelines. They should have, even prepared speaking notes, Q's and A's for a disease X that you don't know about, so that when something happens, you can tweak whatever exists to be able to move forward. And this is done everywhere. And this is sort of part of what we're going to be doing. And so, yes, what we do with regulatory strengthening, building all the systems, we need to keep in mind pandemic preparedness or epidemic preparedness. And fortunately, we are in an environment within the WHO where we are working with our counterparts in vaccine preventable diseases, non-communicable diseases. We have access to information from the monitoring and surveillance, working with various partners. All this sort of intelligence helps in building towards this. And this is a goal that I think it's important, ensuring that the IT systems will work. Without ITs, we wouldn't be able to do anything to ensure that our systems are actually realistic and will be able to deal with this. And I think from time to time, we need to have simulations to help us deal with this, so that when the time comes, we will be able to clearly try to meet this 100-day time limit. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Adrian, there's a question, well, kind of two questions for you. Someone says that, well, Martina says the CTC website is an incredible resource. Can you search for pediatric trial capabilities? And two, is there a plan to extend this to Asia?
So, yes, apologies. I only saw the comment that I shouldn't type all the answers there, a little bit too late. But yes, absolutely good question. So all the data that we have on the platform, there's a number of metadata elements that we have in the background. So you can absolutely filter for pediatric trials. You can filter for any type of therapeutic. You can filter for different phases of trials. So we often share the example of you looking for malaria. So you looking for maybe research centers that have experience in malaria. Then you can filter for specific countries. Then you can filter for specific phases that they should have experience in, and it will really narrow down your search. And the question about Asia, we've had similar ones for South America. Absolutely. We have one funder specifically that's quite interested also in the Asian market. The platform, when we built it originally, is quite a sort of scale ready. So we built it and we have a direct plug into clinicaltrials.gov where we have access to more than almost 1 million trials, and the same type of way that we clean that data and filter all the data within there to find the research centers, we can apply that to other regions in the world. So it's absolutely possible. At the moment, we don't have a concrete plan to move to other regions, but go and follow the clinical trials community LinkedIn page, and if something changes there, or we maybe do a pilot in a country in Asia, we'll definitely share it on that page, and you'll be able to see the progress there.
I wanted to ask a question which is related to Africa has had a lot of innovation and using mobile phones for finances and so on. Can any of you answer whether those sorts of innovations can be harnessed to enhance clinical trials? Anyone want to take that up?
I'll maybe take a stab at it. Absolutely. I think it's known, and I think we're probably globally known for the M-Pesa payment platform that it was built out of Kenya, and it is a powerful tool that we have in Africa, the mobile phone. I think one thing that we've seen in our experience is that often the financial means is often a limiting factor, and even though mobile phones is something that many people in Africa, or most people have, they don't always have the financial means to access the data charges or be able to pay for the data charges that you would need to use a platform like the one that Rumina explained, or even the CTC platform. You can't get to the platform. So there is some limitations there. I think some of the things that is pretty cool, and it's coming more and more, is the zero-rated capabilities. So many mobile operators offers like WhatsApp at no cost to their subscribers. I know YouTube does a lot of that. In some African countries, I know definitely in South Africa, Nigeria, and in Kenya, you can activate something called zero-rated services. So the CTC platform, we can take the CTC platform and we can actually zero-rate all the traffic coming out of Eswatini to the CTC platform, and then those people will not be charged for any data charges when they go to that platform. But we, as the Nuvatech Foundation or the CTC group, we will receive an invoice at the end of the month of all the data charges. So there's a lot of interesting things there, and you can just apply that kind of thinking to anything in clinical trials, whether it's running a trial that Rumina and them are doing, or on the regulatory side, if they want to access regulatory material that Kwasi and Avery are busy with. If you can maybe zero-rate that kind of thing, it'll be cool. WhatsApp, I think, is a super powerful mechanism or a tool in Africa that we can really use extensively. But I'm sure that others also might have a comment.
Anyone else want to try?
Sure, yes. I don't have that much to add. I think we've already covered sort of the exciting opportunities that these technologies do give us. I think mobile platforms have supported participant engagement, data capture, follow-up. You can share reminders, collect patient-reported outcomes, which was a really big thing that was done on mobile phones during COVID, and have real-time communication. I think the only things to point out is around the data security, regulatory compliance, and inclusivity. And we've touched on the need for data to support some of these mechanisms. But I think there's still a little bit of work to be done just to ensure that we comply with everything when you start to use things like WhatsApp in the context of trials. But it does provide us some exciting opportunities to reach people that otherwise wouldn't have been able to participate. So I'm sure that now as we move forward in this time, more regulations and sort of a governance structure around this type of data collection will follow alongside its usage. So very exciting times to live in.
Yes, just to add a little bit to it, I think we need to step back and think about the purpose of regulations. And one of the main reasons that I think regulators exist is really to protect their populations. And that goes with an issue of trust, is an issue of the population having confidence and trust in the regulator. In most of these African countries, the use, as you mentioned, of mobile phones it's quite, the penetration is quite high. And so I think we need to really take advantage of this. And for regulators to really use this as a means to build confidence with their populations. So when, tools like reporting adverse reactions, there are some where you can use mobile phones to do that. This is important. The community engagement part, which you guys talked about before, I think these are things we need to actually leverage on for building community trust. If we want more clinical trials to happen, which we believe it will, we also have to, go against those that may be saying Africans are going to be used as guinea pigs for other people's trials. We need to basically be proactive about some of these things. And so I think that it is still a tool which is to be used. And even among the NRAs, we have WhatsApp groups that allows people to chat effectively together. And I think this is part of the tools that we have to work with, and hopefully we'll be able to add to building a strengthened ecosystem. Thank you.
I think that's a perfect place to stop. I want to thank the three speakers. They were really excellent. I think you gave us a very comprehensive and somewhat even intimidating idea of all the things that need to be done.